Bloodborne. Originally Project Beast during development, it's one of the most celebrated and influential games in the last decade, but it's hard to pinpoint why. At the start of development in 2012, the game was very much akin to From Software's previous titles of Dark Souls and Demon's Souls, a third-person action game with high difficulty, diegetic gameplay systems, and environmental storytelling. Hidetaka Miyazaki, the game's director and now president of From Software, needed to create a new challenge for his players. However, Miyazaki put a self-imposed limitation on his team. Make a challenging game, but don't increase the difficulty. The world was to be unforgiving through atmosphere and art direction. Ryo Fujimaki, the lead graphics artist, and the art team at From Software were tasked with creating this new world, and they succeeded. Welcome to the world of Yharnam. Miyazaki gave Fujimaki and his art team 3 gameplay themes that the new world would have to merge with: the feeling of fighting for one's life, exploring the unknown, and new online elements. The first 2 would become the cornerstone in creating the new world. Fujimaki would have to integrate Miyazaki's gameplay skeleton into their world as well, the skeleton being a list of how Miyazaki wanted the player to feel when playing the game. The skeleton defined the game to be a different aesthetic to the medieval fantasy of Dark Souls and Demon's Souls. It had to give the feeling that if you stood still and waited, you'd be overwhelmed and killed right away. It would feel as if fights were life or death, and show a wide range of enemies. Finally, it would remove shields and add guns for close range, fast, active, and aggressive combat. These themes and gameplay restrictions became the building blocks for Fujimaki's world. All environments, story beats, characters, enemies, and world themes would have to become synonymous with these gameplay themes and restrictions. To start, the new world would have to give the player the feeling of fighting for one's life. Like their previous works on Dark Souls and Demon's Souls, Fujimaki and the art team started by asking explorative questions. If blank has to happen, what does that mean for blank? For example, if Miyazaki wanted a world with guns, but guns that are only specific to close-range combat, what time frame would that put the game world? The time frame could be of an early conception of a gun, which would put the era of the world between the 15th to early 19th century historically. These exploratory questions gave an outline of Fujimaki's new world. Miyazaki wanted a game that is life or death, where if you stood still and waited, you'd be overwhelmed and killed. So how does that affect the world? The world needed to have a threat that is deadly and mysterious. Fujimaki deciding on creating a world overrun by a disease. A disease epidemic creates a world of fear and unpredictability, where all inhabitants have the possibility of killing you. Fujimaki expanded on this idea with the concept of a wide array of enemies trying to kill you. The world needed to be singular in trying to kill the player. A disease epidemic that incapacitates the sick would limit the amount of enemies. Rather, a world where both the physically sick and physically able are trying to kill you would be needed. This led to the creation of the Beast Plague. The Beast Plague would remove all consciousness and reason from those who are sick, and turn loved ones into terrifying and proficient predators. Think zombies. A zombie world is trying to kill you, and those alive are fighting amongst each other, their psyche slowly deteriorating by knowing anyone can turn and kill at any moment. A disease-ridden world where everyone is a threat. Miyazaki and Fujimaki decided on a Beast Plague instead, to allow creative freedom to the art team to create something truly terrifying. The introduction of the Beast Plague re-established the setting as well. The idea of beasts born from inside man within a 15th to 19th century time frame aligns perfectly with the Bram Stoker Victorian era of monsters and gothic horrors. The loss of reason and civility leading to anarchy and brutality was a strong theme for the Victorian era. Think Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. This led to the creation of Yharnam, a massive cursed city inspired by areas seen in Romania and the Czech Republic. The player would arrive when the Beast Plague has gotten completely out of control. The player, needing to face and defeat these monsters, was called a hunter. The outfit and weapon designs were heavily inspired by Gothic horror and Victorian-style clothing to match the setting. The enemies and characters of Yharnam were battered and broken down, allowing the art team to create some truly unnerving designs. Looking at some of the concept art, the art team brought Yharnam to life, but Miyazaki intended to fill it out. He created an internal forum where he would ask about specific details of the world, from the meaning of beast transformations to the effects the world would have on characters. For example, if you are a hunter in this world, are there other hunters in the world? What would their motivation be for hunting? Would there be different groups of hunters? How would those hunters feel about those different groups? What would a broken world do to the psyche of a hunter? What would a broken world do to the psyche of a prey? The art team took these concepts and created characters brought to life through their own expressions, clothing styles, and choice of weapon. Every detail would link the world of Yharnam to the same central themes. This led to the creation of churches and guilds, and characters with their own reasons for hunting and belonging to their respective groups. The world of Yharnam allowed for numerous character designs. There could be a character who revels in hunting, but as time goes on, they start to be haunted by their killings. There could be a character who is slowly losing themselves to the beast plague as their family falls apart from their slow decay. There could be a character who believes in true justice with the church, but is in a world that doesn't have justice. As the world of Yharnam expanded, the idea of mental illness became a central theme. Mental illness that was amplified and created by the physical illness of the environment. Yharnam is a world that is broken, with its inhabitants eventually snapping as well, both through the physical transformation of the beast plague and the psyche of its survivors. Mental illness eventually sweeping through the city like another plague. This expansion into mental illness blended perfectly with the Victorian Gothic aesthetic and allowed the team to expand to surreal horror. Victorian science and philosophy was fixated on the relationship between the brain to ourselves, others, and the world, which gave a creative direction for the horrors From Software would create. Yharnam was evolving from the beast plague to one of metaphysical horror. Yharnam would slowly break down and devolve like its inhabitants, the enemies and environments becoming malformed and unrecognizable. Fujimaki and his art team were starting to explore the unknown. In the late 19th century, H.P. Lovecraft explored the ideas of metaphysical horror in novels such as The Call of Cthulhu. But where H.P. Lovecraft excelled at was the fear of the unknown. The oldest and strongest emotion of mankind is fear, and the oldest and strongest kind of fear is fear of the unknown. As Yharnam expanded to surreal horror and dealings with the mind, Lovecraftian horror became the perfect inspiration for the world to evolve to. However, Lovecraftian horror works in a non-visual medium like literature, where the ideas of madness caused by visual sight allowed for human imagination to excel. But for any visual medium, showing this horror can be an impossible task. To visualize the unseen, Fujimaki and the art team dove into the depths of humans' primordial fears. Eyeballs became misplaced, normal people were transformed into horrifying, unrecognizable beings, and the team played with calming, beautiful imagery to create unease. Miyazaki had the art team explore the ideas of the beauty of heartfelt prayer, the lack of salvation, insanity, and the idea that the stronger or more advanced you are, the fewer offspring you produce in your life. From the concept art to the final creations, these ideas became central to enemy and environmental designs. Lovecraftian horror also became the bridge between the harsh reality of the beast plague and the surreal horror of mental illness Yharnam was to become. The Lovecraftian horror allowed the expansion of the enemies and setting, transforming the game from a gothic beast horror to an otherworldly, horrifying display of cosmic despair. As Yharnam's environments expanded, Miyazaki needed to ensure that the player would continually fear the unknown, which meant unpredictability became essential. The unknown needed to be terrifying and ugly, but sometimes it had to be beautiful and mesmerizing. There had to be safe havens in Yharnam, good people with good intentions, and monsters that wouldn't attack you. Yharnam's hidden, disturbing, surreal horror would need to be sprinkled throughout the game to create mysteries for the player. For example, these large Cthulhu-like beings called amygdala. The amygdala in reality is the part of your brain that registers fear and activates your fight or flight response. It is also associated with creating memories induced by fear. By placing it on something that creates an animalistic sensation of fear, it twists this creature into a bizarre alien monstrosity. As Yharnam slowly sheds its grounded reality, it's shown that these amygdala have been on buildings the entire time. Originally, they are invisible, but could still interact with the player. It is through shedding of Yharnam's reality that these amygdala are shown to have infested Yharnam, bringing a newfound sense of fear to the player. Yharnam's evolution was set, but it needed a central theme to link everything together. It needed blood.
We are born of the blood, made men by the blood, undone by the blood. Our eyes are yet to open. Fear the old blood.
On the gameplay development team, Miyazaki found that blood splatters added tension and fear to the fights. He wanted to integrate blood splatters to all the enemies in the game, which meant that blood would be everywhere. Blood now had to become essential to the world of Yharnam. Blood became the link between characters, guilds, religions, the plague, and the unknown Lovecraftian horrors. And best of all, it fit the world thematically. Blood is strongly associated with diseases and horror naturally, which lent it thematically towards the beast plague. The ideas of unknown horror and unpredictability fit with blood as well. Blood itself is essential for life, but the sight of it creates fear. It is associated with the primal response of being hunted, of prey versus predator. These ideas of hunting, fearing the unknown consequences, and the plague led to blood becoming the anchor that supported the world of Yharnam. In Victorian medical history, blood was considered both life-giving and deeply unsanitary. Our deep fears of seeing blood at the time were both challenged and justified. A blood transfusion could possibly save you, or it could poison you from the inside out. In Yharnam, blood transfusion became the staple between the beast plague and Lovecraftian horror. Yharnam used the idea of challenging and justifying fears of blood to the idea of the old blood, blood that came from powerful Lovecraftian horrors that healed the ills of the flesh. However, the inhabitants of Yharnam would discover that blood would lead to the beast plague and the unearthing of these horrors upon the world. The idea that there's a terrifyingly strong and unknown being whose blood is now inside humans led to explorative questions on the consequences this would have on the world. The church would worship this ancient blood. Philosophers and scientists would find the origin of the blood and be driven mad by their discovery. And normal citizens would suffer the consequences of transfusing Lovecraftian horror blood into their systems. The idea of blood swept through the game, allowing for the art team and Miyazaki to truly expand the world. This led to the final central theme of the game, the idea of inner clashes between humanity and the monster inside. Blood allowed the clash to become tangible, which led to the idea that humanity is the shackle that would hold the monster within at bay. Miyazaki expanded on this theme. The stronger the shackle keeping the urge to transform in place is, the larger the recoil once that shackle is finally broken. The results cause you to transform into a large creature or a more twisted one. Building off of this allowed for the creation of large, monstrous bosses. These bosses would need a strong reason to have such a strong shackle and why the shackle broke. For example, one of the most popular bosses is Vicar Amelia. She is part of the Healing Church, a religious faction based on the idea of blood healing its disciples. When you meet her, she's the last member of the church as the rest have fallen to beasthood. It is seeing the tragedy of Yharnam and her fellow church members that cause her shackles to break and transform her into a large, twisted beast. as the hunter must now kill her. There is a beauty in this design that complements the themes of blood, inner clash, mental illness, exploring the unknown, and fighting for one's life. Vicar Amelia is the perfect representation of Yharnam. Fujimaki and the art team had finished creating the world of Yharnam that encapsulated Miyazaki's vision of his new game, but it would continue to be filled out even after the game's release. The Old Hunters, a downloadable add-on, expanded on the world of Yharnam and allowed the art team to create more horrifying monsters. But the world of Yharnam continued to grow through its community as well. Fan art, videos, fan games, and concept creations are everywhere. Miyazaki and Fujimaki's world had resonated with millions of people, and it's easy to see why it became one of the most influential and celebrated games in the last decade. It became Bloodborne.